It's so obvious to me that I didn't come here to this human experience to be Zen all the time. I came here to have a human experience. I came here to forget that I'm the whole thing and have a human experience where I go on an adventure remembering that I'm the whole thing. It's fascinating to see, like, that character that I think I am also has a story that it thinks is its story, but that whole story never actually happened because the character never happened. It's fascinating. I can't help but just want to bow down to the whole thing. It's a classic checkmate for any remnants of the ego. This session today, I'm really just going to hang out. So if you're open to just hanging out with me, then we can do that. Let me just say some things about heart-based conscious evolution in the most down-to-earth, practical sort of way. Heart-based conscious evolution. What is that? You know, something that I recognize right now, and I have 1,000 times, and I've forgotten it 1,000 times. But it's the realization that in this human experiment, I was going to say experience, but I changed my mind. In this human experiment, what I've noticed is that my awareness, my consciousness is evolving to see more of what is real and true beyond what I imagine to be real and true. And as I do that, as I become more aware of what's real, there is this expansion of, let's just say, love within the heart. Meaning that there is this deeper beauty, appreciation, reverence for the totality of life. And it seems quite obvious that this is the fundamental opportunity of being alive. And also I can say I understand why it might not seem that way. But for me, that's the conclusion. Because before this is seen, and when I forget, the assumption that this life is about getting somewhere, about holding on to something, becoming something, it very much revolves around a personal sense of identity, that which is separate from everything else. And I keep running into the remembrance that, oh wow, it's just not about that. Like, as I'm traveling this journey, I'm constantly running into things that are inviting me into a deeper openness, a deeper willingness to allow what is to be what is. Oh, you know what? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Something that hit me again so profoundly. I love the challenge of communicating these things. Something that hit me so profoundly was just the interconnectedness between everything that is and the realization that everything as it is must be as it is in order for the whole thing to be the whole thing. And this also partly speaks to the conscious evolution, where we are essentially waking up to see this. That in appearance, there's 10,000 pieces. There's this and there's that. in appearance, there's something called nighttime and something called daytime. There's something called winter and something called summer. There's something called good. There's something called bad. There's something called up. There's something called down. There's something called inside, and there's something called outside. And the realization is that there is no independent thing that is not also the other thing. And maybe a great way to point to that being the seasons in life. I mean, we can take the winter time and you can say, oh, okay, there's the winter time. But the winter time is only the winter time because the summertime is the summertime. And the summertime can't be the summertime unless there's something called the winter time. And so these expressions of such things, winter and summer, are not expressions of their individuality. They are simply one aspect of the whole. Meaning, when you see the wintertime, you're seeing the whole, but you're just seeing one part of it. What you say about the wintertime, you're actually saying about the whole, because the wintertime is the whole. If you hate the wintertime, you're hating the whole. I mean, again, silly words, but for me, it points to the remembrance that it doesn't matter so much what I think about it, right? Like, I can argue till I'm blue in the face about winter being too cold, or if only it wasn't what it is. And you see, the assumption is that it's somehow there for me to serve me, rather than it's there to serve the whole thing. Right? I mean, look at the cosmic symphony here, where in order for life to be life, in order for the planet to be the planet, there has to be this expression of season, right? It has to fluctuate from hot to cold. It has to fluctuate from dry to wet. And for so many more reasons than you could possibly count. It's like, it's part of the divine balance of things. It has to be that way. And just like in nature, you can look out at nature and tear it apart into 10,000 pieces without realizing that each piece is the whole thing. Meaning that each piece is not its own thing. It's the whole thing doing that piece. And that piece is vital. And again, it doesn't matter what my thought process, my conditioning, my limited perspective thinks about it. It has to be that way in order for the whole thing to be the whole thing. It almost doesn't matter what questions I have about it, right? It doesn't matter if I'm bothered by animals ripping apart other animals. It doesn't matter if I think things smell bad. It doesn't matter if I think things shouldn't die. It doesn't matter if those questions never get answered. The reality is that it's already been set up so that in order for this life thing to be this life thing, that it has to be the way that it is. And I see the absolute comedy in me thinking that I could possibly know how things should be in order for life to be life. Right? Oh, if only there wasn't the winter time, then life would be so much better. No, if there wasn't a winter time, there would be no life. If only the animals didn't eat each other, then life would be so much better. No, if the animals didn't eat each other, then there wouldn't be life. And what is animals eating each other other than life eating life? Life feeding life. Right? Because you could look at these things just like the winter and the summer, and you can think that they're separate things, right? Like you can think, oh, the winter eats summer, right? It takes over summer. But no, that's not happening. It's the one doing the one. You see how you can tell that narrative? You can see them as two separate things, and you can say this thing does something to this thing. But no, it's the same thing. It's the same thing doing the thing to itself. And so it's not really doing anything. It's doing what it needs to do in order for it to do what it does. And, we can explore this to the max, but when you zoom out and you see the whole thing, you say, oh my God, it's beautiful. There's this beautiful space of stillness, right? Where you get out of your own way, you get out of your own assumptions and your biased opinions and your conditioning, and you look at the whole thing and you're like, this is amazing. This is amazing to be whatever this is. I mean, it's divine. And then you bow down to it and you say, you do whatever you need to do in order for this to go on. I mean, to the degree that this is all so divinely inspired and organized, I mean, we can say in the 10,000 pieces, but there's not even a number for how many apparent pieces there are. From what you find from zooming in and what you find with zooming out. It's beyond, I mean, even to say it's beyond the mind's capacity is just beyond that. It's ridiculous. And you see the unending questions, right? Like this desire that wants to figure it all out, to know. Do you see how it's unending? It reminds me, when scientists get a microscope and they think, oh, we found the smallest thing. And then they build a bigger microscope and they find something smaller. And so they build an even bigger one, or a telescope. It's like, it doesn't matter whether you're looking in or you're looking out. You're going to look as far as you can look, and you're still going to find something unanswered. Which really shows me that this isn't about finding an answer in the mind. It's not about finding the biggest piece. It's not about finding the smallest piece. When you see that it's infinite in every direction that you look, you can't help but just be still. And it's in that stillness, when the mind's not looking anymore because it sees that it can't see, that you become open and available to really recognize that the immensity of that whole is also you. Right? In the same way that the winter is life. The winter isn't winter, its own thing. It's the whole thing. And just like you're not this separate little thing that's doing its own thing. You're the whole thing doing you. That's wild. And the comedy here is not only how much we forget that, but to the degree that we forget that. To the degree that we get so identified with this piece that we think we are, that's separate from the whole thing, that's not the whole thing, and we think that we are this little character in our mind. How hilarious is that? It's like we just completely forget that we're the whole thing. And then we imagine this story of someone that you think you are, which is just an idea in the mind, and you think you're that. It's wild. Nigel, thank you so much, buddy. I see that donation that could feed me for a week. I appreciate that. If I'm fasting. If I'm fasting for 3 days, then that would totally feed me for a week. Thank you, buddy. Isn't that wild? I mean, to just notice this and touch on maybe just a little bit of humor about the whole thing. My goodness. And I see it in my own human, right? Like, the hilarity is that yes, I can see these things and I can articulate these things, but I'm still playing the same human thing that you are, where we forget and we go back into our little character and we think that that character is living a life that's real, which is all fine. It's part of it. We clearly came to this experience to have that kind of experience, in the same way that you go to a movie to forget what you are and fall into the movie. It's so obvious to me that I didn't come here to this human experience to be Zen all the time. I came here to have a human experience. I came here to forget that I'm the whole thing and have a human experience where I go on an adventure remembering that I'm the whole thing. And in remembering that I'm the whole thing, I see the whole thing doesn't matter. Like the whole story of my life. It's fascinating to see, like, that character that I think I am also has a story that it thinks is its story, but that whole story never actually happened because the character never happened. It's just been a character the whole time. Because when I look at the narrative of my story, the narrative is something happened to the character, or the character did this and the character did that. But how can the character do that if the character is not really real? It's only a story believed in. Just like when you go to a movie and you experience emotion, there's part of you that's believing the story. And you're having a physiological response to something that's not really happening. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. And in seeing this, again, like even just in this moment, I can't help but like just want to bow down to the whole thing. Right? Like it's a classic checkmate for any remnants of the ego. Because that's part of the ego's misunderstanding. The ego's struggling to be real. The ego wants to be real when you believe in the ego. And it's fine to believe in the ego. I mean, imagine having this expectation that says, okay, go to the movie, but don't fall into it, right? Like sit there and just be Zen the whole time. Then you'll be spiritual. Then you'll be enlightened if you can go to the movie and not experience any emotion. That's so dumb. That's not the point of the movie. You see, it's through the engagement of getting lost that we have the opportunity to remember. Because in the beauty of remembering, it's only made possible by the other side, which is forgetting. So forgetting is remembering, and remembering is forgetting. They go together and they'll always be that way. And I don't think, I want to say that I know, but I'm just going to be gentle here. But the assumption that the prize is to no longer forget, as far as I'm concerned, is just the ego playing a spiritual game. Like the ego's trying to win the game. There's too much discovery to be had where you're never going to discover the whole thing, right? Like we talked about those 10,000 pieces, which are really a billion pieces, which is really even way more than that. Those are like the discoveries. Do you think that's ever ending? Do you think consciousness is just going to stop discovering the immensity of the miracle we're swimming in? No. And if it's going to do that, if it's going to remember those things, then it's going to forget. And so for me, the real, let's just use the word enlightenment here, is the embrace of both sides. It's to embrace forgetting. It's to embrace remembering. It's to see that they go together, which is really the invitation to just take a step back and let it be, which is also to say to not have judgment for it. And then if you have judgment for it, to not judge the judgment for it. Right? You see, it's just this allowing that sees that it all is as it's supposed to be. And understandably, such a thing can be difficult to hear sometimes. I get that. I've certainly had my moments of hearing that in certain times of my life and wanting to punch somebody in the face who said that. So I get that. But looking back on those times and seeing things more clearly, then I just want to give that person a hug, because then it's like, okay, I get it now. I guess I had something to talk about. And this isn't anything new. I've said all of this before. And that's also what I love about it. My goodness. I mean, I've been running my mouth about this for damn near 15 years now and still saying the same thing. What else is there to see than that? And that's also the beauty of it, is we're discovering the same thing over and over again, right? Just like everything is the same thing, everything is part of the whole. In every discovery of what's real and true, you're just discovering the same whole that is real and true. You're just seeing different sides of it. It's the same truth, which is hilarious because it's almost like saying it's the same God. Wild. Absolutely wild. And adorably and playfully, what gets in the way of all of this is thinking that the mind can figure it out. And this is what, and I can only speak from experience, but this is what gets us lost in our ideologies and our dogmas, is we put a sentence to the discovery and then we think our sentence is the discovery. We think our sentence is the truth, which is the same as looking at winter, giving winter the name winter, and then thinking the truth is called winter. The name you gave it. No, it's not that. It's the whole thing. You see, you know what this is like? This is like looking at a tree, and then in the 10,000 leaves on that tree, you start giving the leaves different names. Could you imagine? Could you imagine giving your fingers different names? Then you're like, this one's me. This is the real one. And it's all just part of the same thing. God, that's hilarious. I found it. This is the truth. I got it. It's finger number 3. Finger 2? No, that's not it. I said finger number 3. Everyone that worships finger number 1 or 4, they're all going to hell until they see that it's finger number 3. My goodness. So funny. you can see how that happens, right? The discovery of what is true is not found in a sentence. The sentence is simply trying to point to that discovery, which is a discovery that is beyond the mind's ability to capture. And that blows my mind, that the mind thinks it can find something that's true. The mind thinks, okay, so here's the thing, right? Here's the hilarious part. What is in the mind if not just imagination? Do you notice this? Like, if you look towards the mind right now, what you'll see is a sea of imagination. If I look at anything, what I see is my mind's interpretation of that. Right? Like, put it this way. When I look at a person, how much of the reality of that person do I see, like their totality, compared to the short story that I tell about them? Can you see how I look at a person and then I imagine a person? That's like looking at a person and then giving them a name, a label, and then thinking they are that name. How real is it that they are the name you give them? How far removed is that name from the reality? Could the name ever touch the reality? No. Could the name be true as it relates to what they are? No. Not even close. I mean, put it this way, and I've used this example 1,000 times. It's like taking a picture of the sunset. There's the picture, which is an image, and then there's the reality of the sunset. And what we do as human beings is we take a picture of the sunset and we say, I've got the sunset. See, it's right here. I've got it. Okay, is this really the sunset? Or is it just an image? It's just an image. It's not even close. The sunset in its reality is aliveness. It's intimately interwoven into the wholeness of all that is. And your image of it is just a thought. A thought that is not that. And so we can go around in our human way thinking about things and thinking that we're thinking about things, but you're just thinking about your own thinking. And the question is do you even see what's real? Do you even see what's really there? Or are you too busy trying to take pictures of everything? It's like this profound difference between thinking you know and realizing that you don't know, while also realizing it's incredibly expansive and you'll never know. And it's profoundly divine. It's sacred. Gosh. All right, you guys got any questions? Ren says, I'm not familiar with your background. How did you get started? How did I get started? Well, when two people love each other, that's too far back. How did I get started? I guess in a practical way, I got started with poetry. I got started with writing love letters to life, and I was really embarrassed by it because I thought it was the most unmanly thing I could be doing. But it felt good. felt sincere. And then I went to a poetry group, which again was weird. But I was like going through a bit of a hermit phase. I wasn't leaving the house much. I was like, I got to get out of the house. So I looked online for like meetups. And I went to a poetry group. I was like, okay, that'd be interesting. And people were sharing poetry, and it was my turn. I said, oh shit. So I shared some poetry, and then they asked me to come back and share my poetry with the whole church. It was like one of these churches that welcomes all different religions. And so I came back like on a Sunday and shared my poetry with the peeps there. And then they asked me to come back again. And then they told other people. And then other people invited me to come share my poetry. And then as I was sharing my poetry, I would also start sharing insight about the poetry, which kind of translates into what I'm doing now. Just sharing insight with less poetry. Yeah. And so that kind of took me on a journey of traveling around. And then like 7 years ago, someone in Europe watched one of my videos and said, hey, if I arrange a tour for you, will you come out to Europe and do a bunch of events? And I said, okay. So that was pretty much it. Yeah, true, Jerry. Yeah, it was a sincerity of what I was that I wasn't familiar with, right? I was too busy trying to be who I thought I was supposed to be. And that poetry was just like a doorway into a deeper truth. And then that also came with just lots of weird experiences, like in my awareness. Like, I guess we can just say like portals opening up and yeah, receiving insights. And a lot of insights that I really didn't comprehend, but it felt deeply true. And so I'd write those things down. And so, yeah, I was like just doing this little training in myself and then watching those things be applied to my life and seeing the subsequent disaster of letting go. How's my relationship going? Why did you read my email from a couple months ago? It's going really, 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 really good. I'm still like, I have these moments where I look at her and I'm like, you are way too beautiful for me. And then I get scared. But yeah, it's going really, really well. Really well. And I wish I could just fill you in on all the details and catch everyone up on how that whole thing happened and the perfect disaster that happened when I moved out here with her and how it was absolutely what I asked for, the disaster. Absolutely asked for it so that I could discover the devotion within me to not run away. Right? To not just find an excuse to run away from something that I actually wanted, which I've been good at in the past. But yeah, I really felt like before I met her, I really felt this movement inside of me that says, holy shit, I really want to devote myself to a woman. And yeah, like have that just be important to me. And it was really weird because I thought I'd have to like go out and find that woman, but she like literally just showed up at my house. Literally showed up at my house. Really weird. But yeah, so it's going good. Merry Christmas, by the way, if you're doing that thing. I'm kind of doing it. Not like I have a tree, but I have listened to a little bit of Christmas music, if that counts. I don't have Christmas lights up. And I've been buying presents for my girlfriend just when we go into town. Like, hey, didn't you say you needed this? Okay, Merry Christmas. There you go. So, yeah, I've got the Christmas spirit. All right. I'll be back sometime. Thanks for hanging out with me. Cheers to the beauty that you already are. Bye-bye.